The Last of Us. Inarguably one of the greatest titles in video game history. The original game, released back in 2013 on the PlayStation 3, was re-released as a PlayStation 4 remaster in 2014, and then saw an entire engine and graphical overhaul for the 2022 remaster for the PlayStation 5. The Last of Us amassed multiple awards, from everything from Game of the Year to Best Visual Design to Best Musical Score, and along the way netting the voice actors for Joel and Ellie, Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson, awards for their vocal performances. The Last of Us took the gaming and entertainment world by storm, quickly becoming one of the best-selling games not only for the PlayStation 3, but also for the PlayStation 4, with the total sales reaching over 30 million copies year to date. The demand for The Last of Us was high, and with a second game that was released to mixed reception and arguably became one of the biggest gaming controversies of all time, the majority of the fanbase wanted to relive the magic of seeing the original game for the first time. Enter HBO, who released a show based on the events of that original game back in 2023, and for the most part, it was well received by both fans of the game and those who never played it. HBO's The Last of Us was heralded as the greatest video game adaptation of all time, and even though I'll agree with that to a certain extent, I'll still pose the question of, was it really that faithful to the original game? I don't think it was, and we're going to explore a few reasons why that is in this video. The Last of Us, Season 1. Let's talk about it. Before I get into this, Toller Team, I want to let this be known. This is an open discussion video. If you agree or disagree with my comparisons, or you have something else that you want to add, please feel free to comment down below. No comments will be edited, held, or deleted, and I'll respond to everyone. I mean literally everyone, because this is my favorite game of all time, and the discussion surrounding it is very important to me. I'm going to set my typical sarcastic asshole temperament aside for as long as I can, which is going to be about 10 minutes or so, and address these issues sincerely and critically. Now, I did enjoy the first season of The Last of Us, albeit not as much as others, considering, like I said, The Last of Us is my favorite game of all time, and I did find quite a few discrepancies. Some forgivable, some not, but I did enjoy it for the most part. The show followed the core events of the game somewhat closely, but it did veer in some directions that I just didn't agree with. The first one being Bill.
Inside the house now.
Yes, the third episode of the show, the controversial one titled Long, Long Time, focuses on the characters of Bill and Frank and the shared life between the two of them. We get to see how they originally met, we get to see the fortification they build for themselves to live in, and along the way we get to see the partnership formed between them, Joel and Tess, which affects the events of the entire storyline as things progress. See, both Bill and Frank are gay, so not only do we get to see them struggle with their sexuality to an extent, we also get to see them overcome those obstacles in the face of an apocalypse, surrounded by creatures and humans alike that are trying to kill them. For what it's worth, it was a beautiful episode, expertly written, well acted, and the addition of Nick Offerman as Bill brought specific gravitas to the role, but they were not the Bill and Frank that we know from the original game. See, in the show, Joel and Ellie find out that Bill has passed away while they're looking for a car. This is the same mission you have in the game in a section titled Bill's Town, but Bill is very much alive in the game. And not only does he help Joel and Ellie, but he directly leads them to a vehicle that he ends up fixing in order for them to use. He doesn't die in the game. Hell, he barely gets into any trouble during the events of the game outside of a few intense moments that Joel and Ellie also witness. Bill also isn't made out to be explicitly gay in the game either. There's a few subtle hints, like the random Playgirl magazines you can find laying around his bunker, and the truck that Joel and Ellie eventually take off in, but it's never outright said.
Oh, why are these all stuck together?
But more as implied, because the characters' sexualities aren't really a focal point of the game. Contrast this against the show, and Bill and Frank's relationship is pretty much the entire reason for episode 3. It doesn't even make sense from a continuity standpoint, because Frank actually hated Bill in the game. At random points throughout the game's mission in Bill's Town, Bill can be heard muttering things under his breath about a partner that he had, and at one point you can even find a note from Frank directly addressed to Bill that says the following.
Bill, I found this in there and I figured you should have it.
That's how you feel. Well, fuck you too, Frank. Fucking idiot. You ready to go?
To put it simply, Frank hated Bill. He hated Bill to the point he tried to leave him, got bit, wrote an angry note to Bill about how much he hated him, and then, well, for YouTube's guidelines, I'll just say he took care of himself. Now look, I'm not attacking the fact that the characters are gay. I don't think the majority of the fan base cares either. It's how it was expanded on and used as an irrelevant plot device in the show that got most of us pissed off. Bill is very important to a large section of the game and some of the unique encounters you have, so axing his character off in the show without exploring any of these elements was not only a disservice to the story, but it was a disservice to the fans who were eagerly awaiting to see how some of these interactions involving the character played out. At this point in the game, Ellie is still very impressionable, and she's finding her own way in the storyline, so her conversations and interactions with Bill most certainly influence a lot of that.
If I see so much as a trick. Ow! Stop! Son of a bitch! You done?
To top it off, I feel like the showrunners squandered the perfect casting that they had with Nick Offerman. You mean to tell me that we could have had Offerman's Bill, Pascal's Joel, and Ramsey's Ellie all in the same scene with conflicting personalities and ways of doing things, and they decided to have Bill pick fucking strawberries and die beside Frank instead? It was just a really odd choice. A choice that they could have done with any other character, even if they made one up, just like they did Kathleen, the leader of the resistance in Kansas City in episode 4, I believe. But they didn't. They chose a fan favorite, well-developed character that served an important purpose in the game and essentially turned him into a martyr to push just how inclusive the show was. Bill isn't the only character the show does the game's counterpart a disservice to, and of course I'm talking about Joel and Ellie themselves. Though not as egregious as Bill, there's still some stark differences between the versions of the characters. I'll never agree with the castings HBO went with. Pascal just doesn't resonate as a person or actor with the Joel we know from the game, and Ramsey, she's something. You know, I could attack her looks just like the millions of other people, and I have before, but instead, here, I'm going to attack her performance from a writing and development perspective. See, the Ellie we know from the game is withdrawn. She's almost innocent in a way, struggling with adjusting to the world around her and the threats from both the infected and humans alike. Along their journey, though, Ellie begins to emit the same positive qualities Joel has, while, in a way, teaching him how to overcome his own negatives. His humanity, being able to emotionally open up to the ones around him and sharing empathy for other good people they come in contact with, like Sam and his brother Henry. On the other hand, Joel is assertive, dominant, and unrelenting in a way that a father figure would be, guiding Ellie and teaching her how to survive in a world that wants nothing more than to kill her. But that's not how things go down in the show. Pascal's performance is more centered on Joel's emotional vulnerability, the loss of his daughter, Tess, and what seems to be the last string of hope he has left. Instead of demanding that Ellie do a particular thing like he does in the game, he instead bargains with her. He finds some sort of compromise which takes away from the dynamic that made the game so popular to begin with. See, Ellie is, in a certain way, a second shot for Joel. A second shot at being the father he should have been, the teaching he should have done, the survival he should have ensured, all the things that could have saved Sarah in the beginning of the game, but those things he failed to do.
Close calls have we had?
Well, we seem to be doing all right so far.
And now you'll be doing even better with Tommy.
Not her, you know.
What?
It wasn't his fault. Nobody could have predicted the events that transpired, but to Joel, and as a father myself, I can draw a relation between the two girls and how he was treating and training Ellie along the way. Instead, we see Ellie taking point on quite a few sequences between the two characters, and sometimes when other characters are present, like Tess.
Everybody fucking except for you. So don't tell me that I'd be safe with somebody else, because the truth is, I would just be more scared.
Ellie was abrasive and rash in the game, but it was always something she turned to Joel to help manage, and if she didn't, he'd take it upon himself to manage it anyway. In the show, we see Ellie pretty much being an asshole, self-righteous know-it-all. She doesn't really consult with Joel on how to approach situations because, it's modern day Hollywood after all. We just can't have female characters taking orders from male ones now, can we? Simply put, Ellie doesn't grow into the strong, self-reliant character she ends up being at the end of the game. she's pretty much that right from the start in the show. She always seems to be in charge of conversations, even with both Joel and Tess present. She's always able to adapt to situations that others have difficulty doing. She almost always does the exact opposite of what Joel tells her to do, and she's presented in a way that makes her appear as if she's Joel's equal. Which, undermines the very father-daughter dynamic that's the focal point of the entire narrative. Granted, some of those issues dissipated as the show went along, but that's because they were supposed to. That's what the original narrative supported, but that doesn't redeem the quality moments of vulnerability we were supposed to see early on in the story. Speaking of what we were supposed to see, I find it odd that in a post-apocalyptic setting where infected people are the primary threat, especially from the game standpoint, the show was extremely light on the actual infected. There's some heavy moments in the first couple of episodes, the obvious first run-in with the clickers, and there's a big action sequence, I believe, in episode 5, but beyond that, they kind of fade into obscurity instead of being the constant looming threat like they are in the game. Granted, just like The Walking Dead, the dynamics and struggles amongst the human characters are the bulk of the substance in the story, but that's always backed by the endless anxiety and threat of danger from the infected that could be around any corner at any time. The game found balance in this by having Joel and Ellie travel from city to city, checkpoint to checkpoint, fighting against raiders in a depot in one segment to fighting a bloater in a high school the next. Now, I can't help but think that if the showrunners cut out some of that unnecessary fluff like in episode 3 or 7, which gave us useless flashback segments that didn't really add to the overall story in any way, they could have focused on some of the more terrifying sequences of the game. I've already gone over episode 3 and its contradiction to its game counterparts, but despite how beautifully executed it was, it served no real purpose to Joel and Ellie's story. The same could be said about episode 7, which showed us the events of the Left Behind DLC, which was never part of the original games, so much so that it released nearly a full year after the initial game's release. But naturally, since it revealed that Ellie was in fact a lesbian and creative director Neil Druckmann gets off on that kind of thing, it was shoehorned into the first season of the show even though it organically didn't belong there. To clarify, I don't have an issue with the DLC or the fact that Ellie's gay. If I'm being frank, I think all that really doesn't fucking matter anyway, but I do have an issue with misusing the very limited 9-episode, 9-hour-long span the show has. The time you could be spending on fleshing out Joel and Ellie's relationship, or the relationship they have with others, or even exploring some of those tense, infected fights, was instead used to throw unnecessarily expanded on flashbacks which affected the pacing of the rest of the show. So, yeah, that's what I've got. I could drone on and on about the differences between the show and the game, but to me, these are the 3 biggest offenses that I could sum up in a timely manner, so you don't have to listen to me talk for 3.5 hours. Was the show horrible? No, for the most part. I'd say it's somewhat faithful to the game, at least to the point where the story can be stomached by any random person that can pick up a TV remote, but there were obviously and objectively some massive missteps along the way that held the show back from being the perfect adaptation. Again, let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments down below. Anyway, I appreciate y'all for checking out my video. I'll talk to y'all later.